It's okay, as soon as you're ready. Pursuant to the Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, the City Council of Bastrop, Texas will hold a special workshop meeting on today, Tuesday, April 19, 2016 at 6 p.m. at City Hall, 1311 Chestnut Street in Bastrop, to consider the following matters. First is call to order. I call us to order. We have a full house here. We will now go to item B, discussion, consideration of possible action on an item that was left over from our meeting we abbreviated from the storm the other night, on the preliminary plat for Wood Run subdivision, Section 2, phases 1, 2, 3, and 4, about 84.897 acres in the SF Austin survey, abstract 3, within area A of the Bastrop ETJ. And this is continued from item D3 from the April 12th meeting. Mr. Talbot. Ms. McCollum.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and City Manager. I'm going to hand out an additional response that I think was dropped off at the last meeting, so we actually received it the day after. With that, this subdivision is Wood Run subdivision. They actually received a variance from City Council for subdivision regulations back at the end of 2014. Essentially, this was a subdivision that was first started in 1998 as part of the Wood Run subdivision, but they had future sections 2 and 3, and they only completed section 1 at that time, which is the current lots that are located along Smith Road. So they are coming back at this point in time to plat sections 2 and 3. So essentially, the sections will fulfill the remaining section 2 and section 3 of the subdivision. And you can see all of these little stubs to the existing Smith Road were even planned at that point in time, and those will be the future street extensions into this new Wood Run sections 2 and 3 of the subdivision. And so this section is 1, and this is Smith Road down here with the existing subdivision of section 1. And you can see all those little steps I was talking about are the new roads that are coming through here. And this is another continuation of the subdivision. So with that, staff is supportive of this. We did receive surrounding property notifications, 2 that were in favor, and I just handed the one this evening that I received. And with that, City Council or Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval at their last Planning and Zoning Commission meeting as well.
What was their vote on that?
It was unanimous.
Is Mr. or Mrs.
The property owner is here.
Fraunell here? Franeck? It's like James and Vivian. These are the people that objected. I want to hear if they've got anything to say. You got any idea why they're objecting?
No, as you can see, that's what I was.
They're not here, correct?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Council?
Melissa, are these manufactured homes or regular homes?
I don't know at this point in time. The property owner is here. If you'd like to ask him, I don't know if he has a home builder.
I don't think it makes a difference. I was just curious.
Yeah.
Was this part of or a different piece of property that we're looking at that we took up something concerning Wood Run maybe it was a year ago?
Absolutely,
This
yes.
is the same one? Or
It
same?
is.
Okay.
You ready for a motion?
Sure.
I move we accept the plat as laid out.
Well, I'll tell you, I would have heard you if you had turned your mic on, so.
Don't worry about it.
Moved by Councilmember Gilliland, seconded by Councilmember Schiff. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Councilmember Gilliland?
Yes.
Councilmember Schiff?
Yes.
Councilmember Jackson?
Yes.
Councilmember McAnally?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Delorosa?
Thank you.
Thank you all. Good luck with the project. We will, Bastrop City Council will meet now in a closed executive session pursuant to the Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, and Sec. to discuss the following, Section 551072, deliberation regarding real property, regarding the purchase, exchange, lease, disposition, or value of real property. We are now in, is that it, Mike? We're now in executive session. We'll be back. City Council will return to its regular workshop session. Or let me say, item C2, we're in our back in our open session. Mike, do we have any action items to take from our executive session?
No, sir.
Item D is our workshop session. D1 is discussion and review of an update on our HUD shelter grant. Mike.
Worked on this quite a lot since our last Tuesday night, and in coordinating with the county grant administrator, the time has just reached the end, and we have to follow a critical path at this point. And to meet that critical path timeline, I don't have any other choice but to pursue what we submitted back in December as what we committed to back in December, which is to build an activity center potentially at Bob Ryan Park.
So this is our original Plan B.
That you approved back on December 9th, I think.
So I guess we ought to reaffirm that. I would hope someone would make a motion to do that.
And there's just several other, because it's a federal grant, for example, in that you have to do a federal environmental assessment. There's other procurement issues that you have to follow that are somewhat different but take more time in how you have to procure those. And when you put all that together, plus design time, plus construction time, you're hitting a very critical time point with all the time that we had spent in discussions with the Y. So that's kind of
how would you like to have this?
I think we just don't have any choice at this point. We have to go through and follow through with what we submitted on December.
So would it suffice to say I move that we go with Plan B, or can you read it out?
I just think that the direction is I need to stay on course with the plan that we submitted back in December in order to meet the time requirements of the grant.
Okay.
We're in workshop, we'll need to do that at the conclusion of workshop.
Okay.
Oh, okay, so that's I'm sorry. So we will come out of the workshop session to make that decision. Well, and I think Kay will probably make a motion at that point. I think, Mike, I just want to say before we move on from this, we have done everything we can to try all kinds of options on this, to try to do the best thing for the community. We've looked at all kinds of approaches. You have been extraordinarily patient, to say the least, with our being moving in different directions, but I would certainly rather have come to this point where we have to make a decision tonight, knowing that we've done everything we could, and that you have worked yourself down and stretched your staff as far as you could to try to come up with some of the other options that we've talked about. So I just want to personally thank you for that, because I think we've owed, all of us have owed that to the community, and we've got several things that just didn't work, and I think we know where we have to go, and we'll get there when we get to the business actions. Item D2 is discussion regarding review of our capital projects. So we've talked about future capital projects in terms of potential general bond election.
First of all, what I'd like to do on that item is pass this handout for council because I'd like to take a little bit different approach tonight so that I think this will help guide the council when we get to the project standpoint. What I've done here, this first page, is I went back and did a historical analysis over the last 6 years from each fiscal year, how much our property valuations increased from one fiscal year to the next. And as you see by the numbers to the right side of the table, it's been an up and down of the amount of valuations, with 2014 being a big substantial increase, and now it's starting to go back down a little bit. But overall, over that 6-year period, using 2010 as the base year and going forward 5 years, or 6 years, excuse me, we have had an overall increase of about 24%. And if you average that out, it comes to an annualized growth of about 4.1%. And if you'll note here, on 2016, that's the current fiscal year that we're working in, our budget this year was based upon a property assessed valuation of $782,928,050. A 1 cent increase in our tax rate will generate approximately $78,292. Now, going into fiscal year 17, 18, 19, and 20, and 21, doing a 5-year projection with a 4.1 average growth, because I think it will average out to that, but that 4.1% is a very close number to what we projected in our water supply study, which was a 3% annualized growth rate. So there's, I think, some justification in the 4.1. We could anticipate that 1 cent in fiscal year 17 would generate 81,000, 2018 approximately 88,000. Excuse me, what those numbers are is what 1 cent will increase. It should be what 1 cent and not a percent. It should be 1 cent increase in your taxes. With that increased valuation, the increased amount our 1 cent would generate all the way to 2021, which is $95,714. Now, if you turn the page, I attached $1 million issuance, what the debt service is on $1 million. And you can see that it's right at 70,000, averages out about $70,000 a year. Now, if you turn to past the tax table, the next page is the general funds portion of debt repayments over the next 20 plus years. And as you'll note, in 2025, we see a significant drop. Now, this table does not take into account our bond refinancing that we're working on, which those could drop down some. But if you'll turn to the next page, which is this year's budget, please note that what is budgeted for debt service this year is almost a consistent figure for the next 5 years out based upon the debt service table that's attached. So, in a roundabout way, what I've tried to do is a more simplified approach to show the council that, from my perspective, if you're wanting to stay below the 60 cent tax rate, and with what our current debt services is, you probably have between $4 to $5 million based upon these projections that would keep us below the 60 cents. And so that's, I mean, I think it gives us a realistic potential growth. And what you're seeing on our historical tax base increase is just not abnormal for a growing city, because you don't pick up all your property taxes when a building's under construction. It's only when it's placed on the tax roll. And that's why you're seeing such a fluctuation there, because some property is under construction as of January 1st, so we don't get to put that on the tax rolls until another budget year. But at least as a guide, overall, we're going to grow between 4 to 5% each year. And so applying that factor to the current valuations, you see what I'm projecting our valuations will go up each year, and then generating what 1 cent will do. So basically, you might even be able to push it to maybe 6 million, but you'd have to stagger out. You couldn't do all your issuance at one time. Now, if you if you went above and let's say it went to 62 cents, and the voters were, I'd want to do some additional analysis, but if you wanted to take a bond election to the voters that was, say, looking at a tax rate potentially of 62 cents, we probably could look at a larger bond amount. But if it did not issue the bonds all at one time, we kind of had a plan, like we're going to get these set of projects done, then we'll do another issue. You're not doing your issue all at one time. This growth will, like when you get down to 2021, when you're going to be generating $95,000 for 1 cent increase, you could potentially, that equates to about a $1.5 million bond and a debt service payment.
Okay, Willie?
Mike, let me see if I caught that right quick. So the 3.5 cents that were under, the 3.5 cents that were under 60 cents, you said we could get 4 to 5 million maybe in a bond?
Yes, sir, if you wanted to stay under the 60, and we didn't issue all the bonds at one time.
And I got that. Now, if you wanted to go to the 62, 63 cent rate, if voters want to do that, what would that mean as far as millions of dollars in bonds?
I would say that we could look at potentially, Willie, 5 to 8. And again, that's predicated upon not issuing all the bonds at one time. That's kind of taken what we discussed at the meeting when Dan was here about staggering and using our growth protections to sync in with when we issue the bonds, so that we have the least amount of impact on the tax rate.
Thank you.
And I hope this table helps. I was trying to figure the best. And so I think this will guide you now when we look at the various projects.
I'm not sure if I figured this right, but if we went up 4 cents on our tax, that would be something like 7 or 8%. And it's just demoralizing to know that we could make that kind of a change and really not produce any more capital than that. I mean, I know I'm not sneezing at $4 or $5 million, but I mean, our needs are so dramatic.
Well, it's
and what it
interesting.
would take to get there is it's almost impossible.
Well, I think there's some other underlying issues here. Also, I mean, even in 2021, I am not projecting that we're going to exceed make $1 billion in assessed valuations. And in my opinion, when you look at our historical valuation that has been added over time, or in the last 6 years, the majority of that's been due to retail development and commercial development, and has not really been anywhere else. And so the question has to be asked, will that trend continue? Because if it doesn't, then I'm a little high in my projected annual growth rate.
If we thought about so much now and so much later and all that, it's possible with the structure of the money we're talking about, the future might never come. I mean, we might say, well, we're going to be at this spot in 6 years and we'll build a whatever. It may be that we won't be at that point and we can't build the whatever.
I mean, at that point, if the projections are wrong, then, and we're not at that tax valuation at that time, at that point, the council is going to have to decide, do they want to go forth with the project and increase it more than what was presented, or hold off until that valuation kicks up.
Right.
And the other thing that is very important is, as we look at the projects, and especially those projects that would be postponed to the future, that we build in an inflationary factor, because if we don't, your project, when you refigure what the project's going to cost, it's going to be, there's going to be a gap with, you have to add additional bonds money to pick up that gap.
Willie again?
I appreciate you talking about the part where we go out for bond approval, and we have some at the front end and some on the back end to eliminate tax shock to people when we go in. That's why prioritizing the projects that we sit down and talk about in future meetings is going to be important, because in my opinion, I think we're behind the 8 ball as far as streets. I think we fell behind a little bit. I think there's some projects on the west side of the river that you're going to see are going to, in my opinion, it addresses part of the transportation plan that you had in effect back in the middle 90s, and today's traffic flow on the west side of the river. And then when you get into the old town Bastrop, it's just going to address, I think, needs of streets and drainage that I think we fell behind the 8 ball on. But I appreciate getting these numbers, and I appreciate the fact that you've ranged it out below the 60 cent or the 60 cent cap, and then beyond that to show what we're looking at as far as the millions in bonds that we'll sit down and discuss in the future.
Okay. With that, I will move to the projects that we discussed back on March 29th. And I put up the title, this is revised for this workshop tonight. I just want to point out there's only been a couple of few minor changes from what was presented to you on March 29th, and this is feedback that I've received from the council. The first one is item 7. I was asked that we should look at extending Agnes Street all the way to 304. I have broken that down into 4 sections, and there's a map attached to this showing the 4 sections and the cost for each section. And the reason I've done that is, part of the reason is that Agnes goes right through the Pecan Park subdivision, and of course they only have to develop it at the time that, let's see, what page is that on? I'm sorry, it's on page 10. The Pecan Park is Agnes Section 2 and Agnes Section 3. Those are the 2 sections that are part of the Pecan Park subdivision.
Did they develop those?
When they develop the property. And so the question becomes, does the council want to be the forerunner there? Because at this point, I don't know where he's at in developing that site. I think we are going to be responsible for Section 1. And of course, again, it gets back to demands, and we are seeing traffic issues in and around Hassler and Childers. And I think the comment was made at the last meeting that we should look at this as an outlet versus dropping down to the full-blown Hassler extension. The other point I want to make is it was suggested that we might want to consider that being expanded to a 4-lane, and in analyzing that, I don't see where there's any benefit, because you've got a choke point where you're tying down at the existing Agnes, and Agnes at 304 has always been planned to align with Home Depot Way, and both of those are a 50 to a 60-foot right-of-way street. So by going to a 4-lane, it's not, all you're going to do is choke down and blow up and choke down. So I just couldn't see doing it any more than basically a 2-lane, maybe a 2-lane with a center turn lane.
Match up with Home Depot Way?
Yes, sir. So that is one change from what you looked at, because the first one that you looked at was just that small extension of Agnes. And on page 2 is a breakdown for each section and the linear feet. And as I say in my statement here, it's a total distance of 5,356 feet, approximately 60 foot of right-of-way, and a little bit wider street of 39 foot from back of curb to back of curb. I think the only other change has been made, and then I'll turn it over to the council, is I wanted to break out for you, I think, is on the fire station. I actually have broken that down into 2 phases based upon input that I have had from y'all, and that is the fire station on the west side of town. The first phase would be to purchase a tract of land, and then secondly, to build a facility. And again, this was just a conceptual plan, a preliminary layout. But the reason I'm breaking it out into 2, my only concern is the longer you wait to buy a piece of property on the west side, the bigger hit is going to be when you do buy it. And because property is just going up out there monthly at the present time. And so I'm just, I know the cost of the facility is staggering, and depending upon where we want to look at for locating a fire station, I think by securing the site will help keep some of our overall expenditures down. And other than that,
Mike, how much land do we need for that?
Anywhere, depending upon what we want to do, anywhere from 3 to 5 acres of land.
Willie,
I'm sorry, I see that. Is that the cost?
can you turn your mic on?
I'm sorry. 3.5 for that the extension of Agnes, right? Is that what you had on here, estimate?
Let's see.
That's what that is?
Yeah, page 2.
Yes, sir, 3.5.
3.5, okay.
And I've broken it down by each section for you, Willie. That's what, section 1 corresponds to the map, section 2 corresponds to the map. It's the various sections. I was going to paperclip this, but the pages are numbered, but you can certainly pull them apart and they'll stay, you can keep them in order, and you might want to pull them out and compare the exhibits with them. But those are the only 2 changes that were made.
Excuse me, let me ask this just to make sure everybody understands. Are we going to possibly vote to approve this project, but only be done in certain phases, or are we going to start and finish?
I think that's a question for the council, because that's really a policy issue. The reason it was broken down into sections is I just want to bring up to the attention of the council that there's an active subdivision right in the middle there, and it depends upon how fast you think that project needs to be moved forward, or the council may want to see if there's an opportunity to work something out with the developer, knowing that he is getting ready to do something in the near future, maybe cost sharing with the council, and then keeping everybody's cost down. But that's why it's broken out into sections.
So one of the things that Mike and I talked about was, process of, obviously we're going to need to make some priorities if we're going to do anything. Maybe the first question is, are you interested in proposing something or some things for a bond election in November? That's what we've been talking about, what we're moving towards. November's the earliest we could do it. Mike's laid out kind of a time frame for us, and we need to be moving
And when
pretty quickly. And maybe Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to point out what the mayor, just follow up with the mayor's comment there. The first day to call the November election would be August the 10th. And in the ordinance, you would have to have pretty much defined your bond propositions, how they're going to be stated as part of the ordinance. So that's kind of the date that you need to be looking for.
So I would, Willie?
No, I thought you were asking for a show of hands or something.
Well, I guess my first question is, do you want, we've talked to, you and Doc have carried over from past councils a kind of rule of thumb, which we would stay under 60 cents on our ad valorem valuation. taxation, and we've talked a lot about that. So maybe that's the starting point. But the question is, I think we ought to figure out how much we're willing to ask the citizens for. I mean, that could be sky's the limit. I don't care, but I think it seems to me that would be our first choice, and then we try to figure out a process for how we're going to prioritize what we're going to ask for.
Let me answer that if I could, and surely Doc could weigh in as well. It's been, I think, 12, 13, 14 years since we had the last bond election, so that 60-cent deal has kind of been sitting out there as a goal. I think it's a good goal, but you know how realistic is it today? But like I said, if you prioritize your projects and you have a good set of projects, explain why you're putting these projects forward. It could be, as the manager said, probably anywhere from 60 to 62 or 63 cents. But I've never heard anybody else but myself talk about the 60-cent deal, or whether they're comfortable with the tax rate. So I don't know. That's just myself. I think it's a good goal, but I don't know what we go out for this time as far as sitting down and still prioritizing how many projects we can go to.
Another way of doing it is to say, how bad do you want what you want, and what's it going to cost? I mean, we could start with we got to do the following, and if it's 80 cents or whatever it is, that's what it is. And somehow we got to find a process. I mean, I could suggest something, but I'd rather it come from you all, and I'll go, Doc, I'll see Doc, and then Gary, and then Willie.
As Willie has said, it's been quite a while since we've had a bond election, and that 60 cents was a suggested proposal by council, but I think since we have so many needs in our community, that we need to put it before the voters and let them decide how much they want to tax themselves. I mean, we can identify the projects and we can explain to them what the cost will be to build these projects, and let them decide what the figure should be. I mean, I think us holding back and saying it's got to be 60 cents is, it's run its course now as far as I'm concerned. So I think the voters are informed enough, and if we let them know what the cost would be and what the projects are, they can make a good decision on that, and I trust them as they've trusted me.
Gary?
Yeah, I mean, my thought would be we ought to try to prioritize what we think the key issues that are needed for the city are. We should break down a bond election to say bond option A, B, C, D, and I don't know that we can break it down street by street, but I think we could, if we look at it in categories, say, especially like if we're going to do a fire station, put that as a separate item, identify it, this is upgrade to the fire, and maybe it's larger than that. It may address our old fire station as well as a new fire station if we're going to talk about fire, but break it down into a logical grouping so that the public can see, okay, you're voting for this package, that package, this package, and what the values of each of those packages are.
Willie, and then Kelly. Kelly?
No, I just wanted to agree with Gary there. Can we, Mike, JC, can we break it down in the election, individual items, so that the voters can choose?
Yeah, you have to be pretty specific in your bond ballots as to what the projects are going to be and what the money is going to be going for. And so the reason for that is so that if the voters do approve it, the bonds are issued based upon the ballot proposition, and that really precludes any council in the future from diverting that money to another project. It has to go to what the voters approved it to based upon the language on the ballot. And of course, one thing we would coordinate with once we got it broken into categories is with bond counsel, Ms. Brown and Mr. Wagmiller, to make sure that we had the right verbiage correctly stated so that it just naturally flows into your bond documents and things of that nature once you get to the bond issuance stage, based upon the fact that if the voters approve it. And
is it so specific, though, that it says bond X is for Farm Street, or does it say bond X is for roads and infrastructure?
No. If you say if bond X is for road improvement, that is no guarantee whether you or future councils, where that's going to be spent. It's really where the council will direct that money to be spent versus let's just pick out, how about number 3? If you had, it would say something to the effect of the reconstruction of Laurel Street with stormwater improvements and associated improvements from Wilson to Pecan. That's where the money would go.
And the voters would know exactly what you're planning to spend it.
Right. And you would also put into, as my understanding, you also would put in the bond amount. That's why if we're going to stage the bonds, we're going to have to take into account some inflationary factors so we don't have to go back or do a supplemental issue through COs to make up the difference.
Right.
And so that we try to get as close as we can to the estimates and projections.
So following Gary's logic, then, it would be beneficial for us to try to prioritize what we think are and then we attach the price to them, and then we put it out for the citizens.
Yeah, and what we want to do is, at some point before August, is maybe have a public hearing and present our priority list and our staging and see what kind of public input. And I would recommend, even on something of that magnitude, that we not do it at a regular council meeting. We actually do it maybe across the street at the convention center away from here and try to get as much public participation, because I think we could gauge from the public how they're responding to us. One, are they open to a bond election? If they are they in agreement with our priority list, and we may want to come back and readjust the priorities after we get the public input.
Doc?
No, I guess I was being too generic. I mean, I felt, when I started thinking about it, we haven't done, I guess some of our council members haven't done a bond proposal and haven't done a project, and so we would definitely have to break it down by categories. We definitely have to have specific projects identified with the different categories, and we'd have to include, like you said, the inflationary factor that would be there for the future. But Gary makes a good point of trying to make some priorities and breaking some things down. I thought from the list that we had that these were pretty much things that we were looking to do, and if we're not willing to go with those full projects, I guess we would take them and prioritize them even more. But all of these are worthy projects that have been identified on the sheet that Mike has given us, the proposed streets and improvements and facilities and all of that. And if we break them down into packages which had categories, then the citizens could make that decision. But yeah, in the bond proposal, and then we get a bond committee, I guess, together, which would have to promote it, since we can't really do that.
We cannot push an election.
Right, we can't do that. We'd have to have citizens to do that. That's another factor that, the council needs to consider.
And that's a good point that you bring up, Doc. If it's been my experience in other cities that, as you said, we're prohibited from promoting an election item, and if you didn't have some kind of citizens action group that was supporting your bond proposal, you don't have much of a chance of it getting through. The law has changed so significantly over the years. I'm telling you, we can't say we think it's good, we can't think it's bad. If we make any comment, including myself, all I can tell is Proposition 1 is for this project, and that's all I can say. I can't say if it's good or if it's bad. Now, an individual citizen can say whatever they want, but any one of us up here, all we can do is report back to the citizens once we decide to go with the ballot proposal, this is the ballot proposal, and that's all we can say.
So a citizens group would have to be self-generated?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so people just sort of show up and do it.
That's a very good point, Doc.
Kelly and then Willie.
I was just going to ask, JC, if we express our priorities, does that fall with what you were just talking about, Mike? Or is it just once it's identified as a
Once you call the election,
okay,
that's when it's cut off. You can have as broad range of discussions that you want, but once you put you agree, if the council agrees upon their priorities, and you put it in your ordinance, and then you call the election, then you're done.
Willie?
Sort of alluding back what Doc was mentioning a while ago on these 11 topics that the managers put together. I know one thing that we did 12, 13 years ago, we were conscious of trying to include different projects around the city where everybody could participate in and not exclude any area of the city where if some area we thought at that time was excluded, the citizens in that area might not vote for the total bond package, so we were very conscious of that when we were putting the package together to send to the voters.
Mike, I'd like to see a map of all these projects on one page.
Okay, sure.
So that you can see the distribution around the city.
Yep.
Are you, so is the next step what Kelly just said? Do we want to try to prioritize these? Do we want to leave everything on here? Do we want to try to have some that we cut? Do you want to come up with the full 12 or 15 million or?
Well, I think if we stay on track and we come back at our third Tuesday in May and give me feedback, I'll make this one sheet map for you. I think it's a good point. And then we can decide which way we're going to go collectively on prioritized projects. Then as we move into June, we can start fine-tuning it down so that come July, we can start putting the bond proposition.
Do y'all want Mike and I to work on a process for prioritizing? Or do you want to just work on that as a group of 6 of us, or have any thoughts on how we might do that? I mean, we've got, what Mike's suggesting is probably 2 months away, but Willie and then Kelly.
Or what you're asking to prioritize at this time, is this all just general obligation debt, general fund debt?
Well, this includes general bond, debt indebtedness, and from my perspective, the utilities one, I felt it was important to put those on because we are facing having to put these projects in place. Now,
Can I restate that question? And I'm thumbing through this handout you just gave us. Is there like a separate total sheet that you could give us, say like, right now on the first 2 pages, that's $10 million of bond debt on street improvements?
Yes, sir.
So much on the building improvements, so much on other infrastructure, whatever.
I can do a
So
separate
we
page.
have a kind
You
of
can pull them out, that's how I had to do it. He's got it in there, but it's just stuck in
it's,
between all.
okay, I see it, I think on page 17, I think on facilities.
It's like 1, 2, 19, 16, 17, 19, I think.
yeah, I tried to break it out by general fund infrastructure, general fund facilities, and then utility projects. Now,
Okay, but I was just looking particularly on this deal, maybe on the first go-around, it's particularly general fund debt, facilities and street improvements, and then kind of have an idea on the total amount, and then say, prioritize, come to you and say, Mike, if we prioritized half of these, what would that mean in the tax rate to an individual homeowner before, and then we might go up on that, we might jump it up some more, but at least, I think starting at halfway point on that, and saying, asking you, what does that mean in tax dollars or tax rate to an individual, and see where we can go from there.
okay.
I mean, that's just my opinion. I mean, I'm sure there's other ways to do it, but that's what I would, since you're starting at 10 million on street improvements, and then we haven't even got to the facility improvements, so.
Okay.
Mike, would you repeat the process that you said? What's the next step?
Well, I would think by a month from now, this is April, that, we ought to have pretty much some degree of understanding of where our priorities lie, and be prepared for some time in June to go to the public and say, this is what we're thinking and looking at doing. Because I'm sure after we go to the public, there's going to be potential refinements to it. And that gives us, going into July, time to start working on and doing the final brushwork work so that we can meet the first council meeting in August and still communicate back to the citizens where we think we ended up based upon public input.
So your suggestion is that in May, we engage in a process after we get the information divided up the way we talked, that we would do some kind of prioritizing at that meeting.
Right.
And then June would be a public hearing. Let me ask y'all this question. We have agreed that on May 17th, we will have a short meeting, which will be a hello, goodbye, changeover, thank outgoing council member, elect, welcome a new council member or two, elect a mayor pro tem, decide on Robert's Rules of Order, and that's all we were going to do. Can we add this to that meeting? Yeah, we'll work on it. We'll work on it. So, question is, do you want to leave that clean, like Ann suggested, you brought to us? Do you want to add this to it and have this at one of our May meetings? And that's my question, Kelly.
Well, I think that because there might be some changes, that I don't know if that the new people want to be sworn in and tackle this on that day. That might be too much for day one.
Well, we could do this on May 10th, and I don't think it's going to take a whole lot of time, but I think it'd be worth it if we did that, and then we would, or, you know, if you wait until May 24th, you got a new council member that's only had a week to get up to speed, so, you know, what are you going to do? Say it again?
It's also election night.
I have another question, though, about prioritizing.
No, it's runoff, but still, I'm concerned.
Well, it's a council meeting night. It may be the new moon, but it's a council meeting night, you know. So,
I have another question on prioritization. Is there a way to identify how long some of these projects have been on the list to do? What's the age of some of these?
I will have to go back and look, because some go back quite a ways, and some go back to, some go back considerable time frame, and some came out of during the budget process when we talked about potentially what I think one of you all referenced. These look familiar, and they are, from the critical needs, that if we were not going to go do a general bond election and we were going to issue COs, what projects would we do? So they're kind of intermingled, so I can pull those out and give those dates for you.
You know, but I think that what's more important here is to look at the need rather than the age. I mean, there can be some things that have been on there forever that you'd kind of like to do, but if you got some more critical things, we really, I think, need to focus on looking at criticality.
Well, I agree, but I would like to know how long some people have been waiting for some projects too. So, is there any way to do this at the next meeting?
well, it depends on Mike getting the information together. Mike?
Just to get started on prioritizing?
I mean, I can have that
That'd be
for you.
a week from today.
No, I mean, we have the 26th. I will do my best. If nothing else, I'll get something out to you by the 28th or 29th. If I don't have it for you on the 26th, that'll give you plenty of time to review it. But it won't take me long to do this, so I don't see any problem getting it to you by Tuesday night.
Willie's asking, so for this Tuesday, for a week from today?
Yeah, I think I can get that done.
All right, okay. Well, then we'll post this for the April 26th meeting, and what we're going to do is we're going to have some additional information rearranged or arranged differently, and Mike and I will try to think of some prioritizing processes between now and then, and maybe that'll be a starter anyway for how we can do it.
Well, my deal was if next Tuesday was too much for them for next Tuesday, meet 2 weeks from tonight.
I mean, I think it depends on Mike. We know we're meeting next week.
Well, we know with 2 weeks you're giving them time. Next week you're pushing them to do what he normally does, plus an agenda, plus getting this ready.
You talking about a special meeting?
Yeah.
2 weeks from now? I'm good with that.
The 3rd, yeah, that works.
Okay.
May, I'm hearing a consensus for May 3rd, which gives Mike a little more time, doesn't press him too much in the middle of a lot of other stuff he's doing. So.
Ms. McInally said she will not be available on the 3rd.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's try this. Mike, if you can get it done in time for posting, we'll post it for the 26th. And if not, we'll make it the 3rd, and we'll give you all the information we can, Kay?
Yeah, well, you just said for me to turn in my priorities ahead of time, which I can certainly do that.
But we'll try, Mike, is that okay with you, Mike? We'll try for next week. If we can't make it, it'll be 2 weeks, and we'll give Kay plenty of opportunity to put her 2 cents in before she leaves town.
Right. But I would at least try to have the information summarized and the map prepared for you, and that will, I think, assist you in how you want to prioritize on the following.
Maybe we can do.
She can turn everything to you to include in the conversation.
And it may be that we may get, if we get something done next week, we may decide there's no reason for a special meeting, there's not that much to do, and then we could do it on the 10th. Will you be back on the 10th, okay? Okay. Well, either way. Okay, so that's a possibility. Anything else on this subject? I appreciate the experience of the Mike and Doc and Willie, who've been through this before, kind of share some things with us, which I'm not sure the rest of us would have either remembered or would occurred to us. So I hope you'll keep speaking up as we move through this process.
Well, one thing we did, and I know we did it with the police building, and I know we did it with the other big election on the general fund, but the 5 or 6 bond proposals that we had, and Doc was, I think, spoke to that. We did create a committee to go out and take the bond package out to the citizens of the community for approval.
Yeah, and my question, as I asked earlier, is can we do that? Or, I mean, can we create a committee, or is that prejudicial or biased?
I don't think you can.
Can't do it anymore. But we know that we have a lot of citizens that listen and care and always and watch us on TV, and will, I no doubt, come to the fore.
I'll be a citizen then. Maybe I'll help you out with that.
Well, be a good citizen, Doc. You've always been a good citizen. I think we're done on this. Our next item is carryover from our last special meeting. We have. Well, I'm gonna wait till Kelly gets back. Anybody need a break? Yeah. We're gonna take a 5-minute break. Recess for 5 minutes.
Yeah, the report was sent out with the agenda, and so it's, we kind of have gotten out of sync, because tonight is normally when we would have a utility committee meeting, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have, but it shows for the quarter, January through March, kind of how utilities are going, what we're having, and overall operations. And I'll just be glad to answer any questions. This report has been kind of structured at the request of the council, and so I'm really glad to answer any questions.
Yeah, just remind everybody that we're essentially the board of a couple of pretty big businesses.
Yes, sir.
And Mike's the general manager of them, and I think we've, Mike, you don't, or any of your staff don't see anything of particular note, or you would have pointed that out to us. Right. It looks pretty good.
Overall, I mean, we've had, I think I think the biggest change has been we're now fully operational under the automated meter reading system, and we have transitioned now so that when the LCRA reads their electric bill, it's compatible when we're reading the electric bills, and that's been a major accomplishment in creating that capability and compatibility, and a lot of effort was put forth by the staff to make sure that we got those meters installed, and we're seeing the fruits and benefits of it now. Staff is alerted by computer now if someone's water consumption seems to be out of kilter, and we're notifying the customer and saying, you know, it's showing that you're using more water or electricity than you normally do. Is there something going on at your house? And a couple of people have found a leak, not a large group, but a couple of people have found a leak at their house. Just some other noted things I have discussed with the council in the past. We get more and more with the amount of construction going on in the city. We're required to do line locates, and that's a big demand being hit both on the electric, because we have to go out and identify electric, water, and wastewater, and that continues to eat into the operational times. But overall, we had a pretty well mild winter weather-wise, so our electric bills were within normal range and billings and such. So, and we have added an expansion to this since we did change waste haulers. We have provided you a progressive report, how much tonnage has been pulled out of the city for trash recycling, and both for commercial and residential. A little disappointed that people seem to have kind of tapered off on recycling residentially, because we saw about 10 tons of dip in recycling from October to November and December. And, you know, if we can recycle it, let's not send it to the landfill. So I think this is new that you've not seen before. So
That's good. We have never talked about that, and the last topic you mentioned, it was one of our big deals on the contract. So let's get busy, citizens, and recycle better. Think green.
I'll get on another team up to clean up.
Get Kelly.
I have a question for Mike.
Yeah.
How are our dirty water calls?
they're down. We are doing some flushing, but for the quarter, let's see, I just saw it here. His report. I just had it in my hand because I knew that was going to come up.
I think we did.
We had about, I'm trying to make sure I get the right color here. We had 34 dirty water calls, or about 2% of our call-in for services were dirty water.
Is that up, down, normal?
On average, that's about what we see over a three-month period, I would say. It's not high, it's about normal, I would say.
So how long does it take us to address the dirty water calls?
It depends on what causes the dirty water problem. One of the, I think it may have been the quarter before, the generators are supposed to periodically come on and switch, and we have to do that. And when it went through that process, it actually shorted out the system, and for a period of time, the west side was getting low on water, so we had to change the flow of water. And anytime you change the flow, you're going to get the dirty water. But we have been aggressive in installing what Trey had bought up during budget time, these automatic flushers. That's helped considerably. And the project that you approved a few weeks ago, which is on our capital project, the new elevated tank and such, that will be a major impact on dirty water calls, because we won't be getting into flipping that flow like we have to periodically. And I should have mentioned, I was working with Tracy before the meeting, and I hope to tell you at least by the 10th, I don't think we're going to have to issue any bonds. We're going to be able to pay cash for the elevated tank and the line without issuing any debt at all. And I think that's a significant.
Really?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, very good, very good. Gary?
I just wanted to make an observation. We've had a lot of rain this year and a lot of rain this week.
Oh,
and
yes.
I've noticed that the trees are very full. The boughs are about to break on some of those, and I just wondered if utilities are looking at line issues with branches and even right-of-ways as well. A lot of the streets, the branches are really hanging over.
Well, I think my response to that is, as a result of the 2011 fire, we have been very aggressive, and we have spent a lot of money trimming trees away from our power lines. And even though we did have a lot of rain and we did have flood calls, we got hardly any calls for power outages because we've been so aggressive in cutting the lines back or the brush back away from the limbs. I didn't get one call. I got a bunch of calls about flooding, but I didn't get any calls Sunday about power being out, and I think that's directly reflective of the very aggressive effort that Curtis has been taking and cutting the trees. And I think that's reflective in his, on his report. It wouldn't reflect this, but I think he shows reliability factor, and you can see for the this first quarter in 2006, we had almost 100% reliability, and that's on page. It shows your reliability time. We had a little bit down dip in the fourth quarter, but overall, for the last year, 2 years, we've had about a 99 to 100% reliability factor, and that's directly, again, attributable to taking a very aggressive approach, because I remember when I first got here in 2006, if we'd had a storm like we did Sunday, my phone would have been lighting up like a Christmas tree, both with flooding and with power lines. Also, I want to say, even though we did get a lot of calls, Trey and I went over, and the calls that we would have gotten 3 years ago compared to what we got this weekend, they're down considerably. I mean, there has been a lot of effort put forth by the Public Works Department and cleaned up a lot of areas that people repetitively called that no longer call anymore because we have gone out and fixed it. We still got a lot more areas to fix, but the number of calls coming in are going down.
Good, very good, thank you. Well, it's a good review, and we will now adjourn our workshop session and reconvene to our special meeting to take any action. I know we need action on the item of the HUD grant, and Kay was going to make the motion. Mike, just would you remind us the size of that building?
It's approximately 6,400 square feet. It's got a major activity area that can be used for recreational purposes. It has classrooms, bathrooms for male and female, and showers. It has a kitchen facility. It has a laundry room. And of course, as I have always said, it has to be designed so to have a window check-in for when we have to set that up for shelter. And that building does also include storage for the cots and things that we're going to have to keep on hand. I wish we could have gone a different route, and we just didn't make it. We just ran out of time. But I still think it's a facility on a small scale that will serve the community well. I know I've spoken to the Boys and Girls Club. They would like to use it. Senior citizens have expressed a lot of interest in wanting to utilize that building. So I think you'll find that it will be used by our citizens.
Yeah, and I want to say I think that there was a schematic of that in the December 8 minutes packet. So anybody wants to know more detail can look there. Is there a motion that we reaffirm our decision of December 8th?
I'll move.
Moved by Kelly. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Doc. I think we know what we need to do, so we're going to vote. Ann, if you will call the roll.
Councilmember Gilliland?
Yes.
Councilmember Jackson?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem De La Rosa?
Yes.
Councilmember Schiff?
Not on this one. Yeah, thank you for the offer, Willie, but not on this one. I didn't want 2 no votes on this one, okay? We have reached the, well, maybe you can do it before I'm done. We've reached the end of our meeting, and I'm going to call on Gary.
I move to return this.
And second by Willie. Will you call the roll?
Councilmember Schiff? Yes. Mayor Pro Tem De La Rosa?
Yes.
Councilmember Jackson? Councilmember Gilliland?